Hello, boys and girls. So, our story last week was about the Junkyard Wonders, and we talked about what they were going to do, and they're going to go to the junkyard now with their teacher, and we're going to see what happens when they get to the junkyard. At the junkyard, Mrs. Peterson stopped us. Now form into your tribes. Then collect everything you think you could use to make something new. Remember, Wonders, here's your chance. Forget what the object was. Imagine what it could be. Each of the tribes set off across the junkyard, collecting wheels, doors, handles, latches. We vanillas hadn't gotten just the right junk, though, until almost the end of our visit. As Jody, Ravanna, Tom, and I climbed over the last pile of assorted junk, Gibby called to us. He was standing under the shed roof looking up. There, hanging from the roof struts, was the old wrecked model airplane. Gib, that's just an old torn up plane, Tom said, turning to leave. No, Gibby said, it's beautiful. I see it. We are going to rebuild it into something bigger, better, something wonderful, something that will defy gravity itself. This plane is going to fly all the way to the moon. There was such wonder in his eyes that we knew we just had to have it. For the next few weeks during the last hour of class time, we worked on our new inventions. As we hammered and sawed and cut, Mrs. Peterson read to us Great Expectation, David Copperfield, and sometimes poetry. But every day, Mrs. Peterson reminded us, some people look at things the way they are and cry, why? But I want you to look at things and see what they could be and ask, why not? Gibby was the boss of our plane project. He removed all the outer skin, built in new struts, and repaired a lot of the skeleton. Ravanna placed the old skin with pure silk. Finally, we painted the remodeled plane with low resistant lacquer. But would it fly? The day came when we were to present our stupendous projects. The Cinnamon tribe was first. They unveiled a tangled sculpture of hollow tubes. Well, Mrs. Peterson asked the Cinnamons, what is your invention? It's a vibraphone, the Cinnamons called out. It took 3 people to play it. Fabulous. The almonds made a hanging wall maze full of levers, volcums, and counterweights. When the ball bearings were loaded into the top, they clanged down, bounced, shivered, and jumped as they ran through the maze. Stupendous! When the lemons uncovered their device, none of us could figure out what it was. This is perpetual motion. Dallas Schaefer gave his invention a shove. It leaned way forward, ringing bells, pulling at springs, and twisting back and forth. We must have watched that thing for 15 minutes. It just didn't stop. When it was Vanilla's turn, Gibby pulled the cover off. But that's just an old model plane, Booth Shiver said. Wrong, Gibby shouted back. This here airplane is gonna defy gravity. This baby's gonna go all the way to the moon. Everyone laughed. Mrs. Peterson spoke up. If Gibby says it's destined for the moon, I, for one, believe him. Come on, Gibby. Will that thing fly? Somebody shouted. Oh, it will fly all right. We flew it like a kite off Putman's Hill, Jody triumphed. We had. That was off a hill, but if it flies by itself, though, we need a perpetual motion. He means a motor, I added. And we found the perfect one. It will take the plane right into the sky. The trouble is, it's expensive. What? That's when the tribe stepped in. One of them, Mrs. Peterson, asked the whole class if they would help raise money for the motor. Everyone cheered. It was unanimous. They would. For the next few weeks, all the mums made cakes and cookies and sold them at big sales. Our dad sponsored car washes. All of us junkyard kids used things we had gotten from Mr. Beach's and made gadgets to sell. By that spring, we had made enough money to buy this perfect motor. The next thing to do was to set a date for launch. We wanted everyone in the school to see it. That's when Gibby thought of the school science fair. Perfect, Jody said. He had started missing a lot of school, not feeling well. When he was there, Ravanna was at his side. Sometimes she even helped him climb the stairs. We could launch it from the school roof, and it would fly right over the field where the fair is. The class cheered. Maybe, Mrs. Peterson said, but wait. This magnificent airstrip has to have a name. Everyone started calling out names like Fabulous Flyer and a Windy Wings. Jody stood up. He sure looked pale. I think she needs to be called the Junkyard Wonder because we made it out of junk and because we Junkyard Wonders made it. That plane is us. It was just a week later when Mrs. Peterson was late. She was never late. Her eyes were red and she looked sad. Please sit down. I have some very bad news. There was silence. We have lost Jody Beach. He passed away last night in his sleep. Then she put her face in her hands and cried. How? I managed to sputter. Ravanna and I held hands. Jody had a disease that made his body grow faster than it should. It just kept growing and growing so fast that his dear heart couldn't keep up. It just gave out, Mrs. Peterson answered. Later that day, the whole class went to the woods behind the school to collect flowers and to remember Jody. Now I know what the plane has to be called, a voice called out. At first we couldn't figure out who was talking. Then to our shock we realized it was Ravanna. None of us knew she could talk. He wanted it to be called the Junkyard Wonder. That's what it has to be. Tears rolled down her cheeks. All of us agreed. Gibby's dad mounted the motor on the machine and placed it on the table at the back of the workshop. When we saw it, we all gathered round. It was so beautiful. We tried it out more than once from the hill in the back of Gibby's house. It seemed to work, but would it work from the roof of the school on the fair day? And would we even get a chance to try? The stairway to the roof was always locked. Maybe Mr. Weeks, the janitor, could help us get to the roof. I think he will, Mrs. Peterson said, but it has to be a secret. That day before the fair, we could hardly contain ourselves. Would newspapers be there? Scientists from a nearby university? We huddled together out on the playground, chattering about our plan for the launch. Cheese it! Look who's listening, Tom warned. It was Barton Poole. He'd heard everything. He leaned into Gibby's face. Your dad wears skirts. Then he sneered. And no one's allowed on the school roof. Got it? No one. And I'm telling the principal about your stupid plan. And sure enough, when we got back to our schoolroom, the principal was waiting for us. And Barton Poole was with him. I have been informed of your plans for the science fair, Mrs. Peterson. There will be no launching from the school roof and no fuel-driven airplanes anywhere on the school grounds. It could be very dangerous. Mr. Weeks will keep your plane in the janitor closet until the end of school year. The principal turned on his heel and left the room. Mr. Weeks looked very sad as he carried the Wonder out of the room. Sorry, kids, he said. We were stunned. Ravanna started crying. This is going to be for Jody. Mrs. Peterson said nothing for a time, then she began. We are going to launch the Wonder tomorrow, just as we planned, and from the roof. Mrs. Peterson told us to be at Mr. Weeks's closet tomorrow morning, the morning of the fair. Our secret weapon just turned out to be Mr. McDonald, Gibby's dad. If Mr. McDonald stayed with us during the launch, the principal was okay with it. We couldn't believe the good news. Mr. Weeks handed the wonder to Gibby's dad. "Let's take her up," he said to us. On the roof we could see kids pouring out to the field to look at the science exhibits that were being set up. Ravenna pulled gorgeous silk streams that she had painted out of a bag and let them stay rolled up at the edge of the roof. Then, with Tom's help, Gibby and his dad put the wonder in place. They carefully connected the engine to the car battery, then primed the pump to deliver the fuel from the tin sitting next to it into the engine. Then they pumped the fuel into the plane. We all stood back and watched. "Maybe it'll go all the way to Lansing," I suspected. "Maybe even to Detroit," Tom said. "Maybe around the world," Ravenna whispered. "No," said Gibby with a grin. "This baby's gonna go all the way to the moon." When the whole class assembled on the field, Mrs. Peterson signaled Gibby's dad to begin the countdown to start the engine. Mr. McDonald knelt in front of it while Gibby held the plane still, spinning the propeller over and over again. But the engine didn't catch on. We held our breaths. "Pump it again," Mr. McDonald said to Gibby. He asked some of the boys to hold on to the wonder. "And you have to let it go just the right moment, or it will bank right or left. Understood?" He spun the propeller a few more times, and then with a loud bang and a roar, the propeller started spinning. Blue smoke puffed out. Someone in the field yelled and everyone looked up at the roof. That was when Ravenna unfurled her banner down the side of the building. Almost to speed, Gibby's dad hollered, 10, 9, 8. When he got to 1, Mr. McDonald hollered, "Let her go!" The Junkyard Wonder shot out of everyone's hand. It was airborne. First it went over the field, then it sputtered and seemed to stall. Then the injured roared to life again with a noise that was deafening. The Wonder's nose pointed straight up, up, and up, straight towards the sun. We all ran to the wall of the roof and watched breathlessly as it streaked through the clouds covered. The cloud cover then appeared above, ever skyward, straight to the stratosphere. We all watched it till it became a speck in the sky. Then we couldn't see it anymore. Even though the science department from the local university was there, along with the school board and the newspapers, for all of us, it was only Mrs. Peterson that mattered, and Jody. Tears glistened in Mrs. Peterson's eyes as she watched the wonder climb into the heavens. "Like I said," Gibby whispered, "this baby's going straight to the moon." That's a neat little story about what they did as they worked together. And if we work together, we can get lots done. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.